The smell hit me first, camphor and old wood, underlaid with something sweeter, like dried roses crushed to powder. It wafted from the open door of the storage unit, sharp enough to make my eyes water in the August heat. I stood there on the cracked concrete, one hand shielding my face from the glare bouncing off the metal units, the other clutching a key that felt heavier than it should. My sister's voice crackled through my phone speaker, which I'd left on the hood of my car. "Lynn, are you even listening? Just leave it. Whatever junk David left you, it's not worth the storage fees." I wasn't listening. I was staring into the dark rectangle of the unit, where shapes huddled under white sheets like sleeping ghosts. The camphor smell grew stronger as I stepped across the threshold, and with it came something else, a sensation like falling. Like the ground tilting beneath my feet while simultaneously rushing up to meet me. My hand shot out to steady myself against the door frame. The metal was scorching under my palm, but I barely felt it. Because suddenly, impossibly, I was remembering things that hadn't happened yet. No, that wasn't quite right. I was remembering things that had happened, just not in this version of events. "Lynn? Lynn, you still there?" I picked up the phone with shaking fingers. "I'll call you back." But I ended the call. The storage unit was 10 feet by 10 feet, packed floor to ceiling. In the dim light filtering past me, I could make out the curved leg of what might be a table, the corner of a cabinet, the bulk of something large and rectangular wrapped in moving blankets. The white sheets covering most of the furniture had yellowed along the folds. Though David had only put these things here 6 months ago. 6 months ago when he'd moved out. 6 months ago when our marriage had ended with all the passion of a business merger gone wrong. Polite, efficient, and utterly final. Or at least, that's what had happened this time. I pulled the first sheet away, and dust motes exploded into the air, dancing in the shaft of sunlight like snow in a snow globe. Beneath the sheet was a cabinet, tall, narrow, with a door of intricately carved wood. The carving showed a scene of mountains and pine trees, done in such fine detail I could make out individual needles on the branches. The wood was dark, almost black, with a deep grain that caught the light. My fingers traced the carving. The wood was cool and smooth, polished by decades, no, centuries, of hands touching it just like this. And the reproduction! The appraiser's voice echoed in my memory, except it wasn't a memory from this timeline. It was from before, from the other life. Modern piece made to look antique. See how the carving is too perfect? Real Qing dynasty work would show more irregularity, more tool marks. This is machine carved, probably from the 1980s. Worth maybe $200–300 at most. I had believed him. Of course I had. Why wouldn't I? He was the expert, recommended by my lawyer as the best in the city for Chinese antiques. I'd let David take everything except these pieces, the furniture his grandmother had left him, the pieces he'd offered me as a gesture of goodwill in the divorce. I'd told him to sell it all and keep the money. I hadn't wanted anything from him, least of all furniture. In that other life, the one I'd already lived, I'd walked away with nothing but my clothes, my car, and a sense of moral superiority that had kept me warm for approximately 3 weeks before the loneliness set in. But that's not why the memories were flooding back now, standing in this storage unit with my hand on wood that felt alive under my fingers. It was because I'd died. I died at 47. Alone in a studio apartment, from a heart attack the coroner said was brought on by stress and a genetic condition no one had bothered to check for. I died with $347 in my checking account, 3 months behind on rent, and a stack of medical bills I'd been ignoring because what was the point? I died, and then I'd woken up. Woken up 6 months ago, in bed next to David, with his alarm going off at 6 a.m., the way it always did. Woken up and thought it was a dream, that I'd somehow hallucinated 20 years of struggle and failure. But no, the knowledge was too complete, too detailed. I knew what would happen if I opened the news app on my phone. I knew what David would say when I asked him about his day. I knew that in 3 weeks, he would sit me down at the kitchen table and tell me, very calmly, that he thought we should separate. I'd spent those 6 months in a fog, going through the motions, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And when David had given me that same speech at that same table, I just nodded and said okay. The divorce had proceeded exactly as before. Polite, efficient, utterly final. Except this time, when he'd offered me the furniture, I'd said yes. I pulled away more sheets. A round table, the wood so dark it was nearly black. With 5 legs instead of 4, each one carved to look like a bamboo stalk, complete with nodes and the suggestion of leaves. The top was mother-of-pearl inlay, depicting a garden scene. A pavilion, a willow tree, a woman in flowing robes feeding fish in a pond. Some of the pearl had yellowed with age, giving the woman's robe a creamy antique glow. A pair of chairs, horseshoe-backed, with seats of woven rattan that had dried and cracked. The wood of the frames was the same deep, almost black color, smooth as glass. A standing screen, 4 panels wide, each panel painted with birds and flowers. The painting was so faded I could barely make out the details, but I could see enough. A crane, a phoenix, chrysanthemums, peonies. The wood frame was simple, but the joinery was exquisite. No nails, just wood fitted to wood with such precision that even now, after however many years, the panels stood straight and true. And then, in the back, the largest piece. I had to move 2 chairs and the small table to reach it, and even then I could barely squeeze past. The moving blankets fell away at my touch, revealing a cabinet, no, a wardrobe, that stood nearly 7 feet tall. It was made of the same dark wood as everything else, but this piece was clearly the masterwork of the collection. The doors were carved with dragons and clouds, the dragons in such high relief they seemed to leap from the wood. The sides were inlaid with jade and ivory, geometric patterns that drew the eye inward, toward the center, toward the doors, and whatever treasures they might contain. I didn't open the doors. Not yet. Instead, I stepped back, squeezing myself against the wall of the storage unit, and just looked at it all. In my previous life, I'd never even seen these pieces. I'd told David to sell them, and he had, or so I'd assumed. I'd never asked what happened to them. We'd never spoken again after the divorce was finalized. He'd moved to Singapore for work. I'd heard through mutual friends. And that was that. I'd spent the next 20 years working jobs I hated, living in apartments that grew progressively smaller and shabbier, dating men who were at best indifferent and at worst cruel. I'd told myself I was fine, that I'd made the right choice, that I didn't need anything from David or anyone else. And then I died. But here was the thing I couldn't stop thinking about. The thing that had been nagging at me for the past 6 months. Why? Why had I been sent back? Well, what was I supposed to do differently? I'd tried changing small things. I'd been nicer to the barista at my regular coffee shop, which resulted in slightly better coffee, but no cosmic revelations. I'd taken a different route to work, which saved me 5 minutes but seemed otherwise meaningless. I'd even tried to salvage my marriage, suggesting counseling, date nights, all the things the internet said would help. David had looked at me with such gentle confusion, like I was a stranger speaking a foreign language. And I'd realized he didn't love me. Maybe he never had. We'd gotten married because it seemed like the logical next step, because we were both 27 and all our friends were getting married, because his mother liked me and my mother liked him. There was no passion to rekindle because there'd never been passion to begin with. So the divorce had happened anyway, right on schedule, and I'd found myself here in this storage unit with a key in my hand and a decision to make: accept the furniture or walk away. This time, I'd accepted. My phone rang. Not my sister this time. David's number flashed on the screen. Hello? Hey. His voice was the same as always. Pleasant, neutral, like he was talking to a coworker about a project deadline. I just wanted to check if you'd made it to the storage unit. The rental's paid through the end of the month, but after that, I'm here now, I said. I'm gonna take it. All of it. A pause. Really? I mean, that's great, but Lynn, you know you don't have space for all this in your apartment? He was right. My new place, a 1-bedroom I'd rented after moving out of the house we'd shared, could maybe fit the small table and the chairs. The wardrobe alone would take up half my bedroom. I'll figure it out, I said. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, well, I'm glad someone's getting use out of it. My grandmother would have been happy to know it's going to you. I almost laughed. His grandmother had barely tolerated me, had made it clear from the first time we met that she thought David could do better. But she'd been dead for 10 years, and these pieces were all that remained of her apartment in Taipei, shipped over when David's parents had finally cleaned the place out. Thank you, I said instead. No problem. Take care, Lynn. He ended the call. I stood there for a while longer, breathing in the camphor smell. I feeling the heat of the day pressing against my back while cool air from the shaded unit touched my face. Outside, I could hear traffic on the distant highway, the hum of the city going about its business. But in here, surrounded by these silent wooden guardians, I felt like I'd stepped out of time entirely. The appraiser I'd hired, or would hire, I had to keep reminding myself to think in the right tense, wasn't wrong exactly. These pieces were reproductions, just not the kind he thought. They were reproductions in the sense that they'd been made in the style of older pieces, yes, but they'd been made in the late Qing dynasty, around 1890, by a master craftsman whose name I didn't know, but whose work I would come to know very, very well. Because in my previous life, 20 years from now, I'd been in a museum. A traveling exhibition from the National Palace Museum in Taiwan, showcasing the lost art of Qing dynasty furniture. I'd gone because it was free on Wednesdays, and I'd had nothing else to do, no one to do it with, just another lonely afternoon to fill. And there, in the center of the exhibition, had been a wardrobe. Not this wardrobe, not exactly, but close enough that I'd stopped in my tracks, close enough that I'd stood there for 20 minutes, reading every word of the placard, studying every inch of the carved dragons and cloud patterns. The placard had explained that this particular piece was made by the Lin family workshop in Taipei, active from 1850 to 1920. The Lin family had been known for their meticulous reproductions of earlier Qing and Ming dynasty furniture. See, reproductions so perfect that even experts had trouble telling them from originals. But more than that, they'd been innovators, pushing the traditional designs in subtle new directions, adding their own touches, their own artistic vision. By the 1950s, the workshop had closed, the family scattered. Most of their work had been lost or destroyed during various wars and upheavals. The few surviving pieces were considered museum quality, each one worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions, depending on the provenance. The wardrobe in the museum had sold at auction in 2038 for $1.2 million US. And here I was, standing in front of what I was 99% certain was another piece from that same workshop, in a storage unit in Queens, with an appraiser's voice in my head saying, worth maybe $200 to $300 at most. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The apartment I'd rented was in a building that had seen better days, probably sometime in the 1960s, when it was first built. The elevator creaked and groaned, the hallway carpet was stained in ways I tried not to think too hard about, and my neighbors included a couple who fought every night at 2 a.m., a guy who played the saxophone at random hours, and an elderly woman who collected cats. But it was mine, my name on the lease, my deposit, my problem if anything broke. I'd moved in 2 weeks ago with just the basics: a bed, a small table, 2 chairs, a lamp. The living room was completely empty except for a folding chair I'd found on the curb and a TV I'd bought secondhand. David had offered to help me move, to let me take furniture from the house, but I'd refused. I wanted nothing that reminded me of that life, that marriage, that slow suffocation of the soul, except now I did want something. I wanted these impossible pieces of furniture that everyone said were worthless. The movers I hired were 2 Ukrainian guys with a truck that looked like it might not survive the trip. They didn't speak much English, which was fine because I didn't feel like talking. They just looked at the storage unit, looked at each other, shrugged, and got to work. It took 4 trips. The wardrobe wouldn't fit in the elevator, so they had to carry it up 6 flights of stairs, cursing in Ukrainian the whole way. I tipped them an extra $100, and they smiled for the first time all day. By the time everything was inside, my apartment didn't look like an apartment anymore. It looked like a warehouse. A storage facility, a museum in mid-installation. The wardrobe dominated my bedroom, making my queen bed look like a child's cot. The round table took up most of the living room. The chairs in the smaller cabinet were crammed wherever they'd fit. I stood in the middle of it all, sweating despite the AC, and wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister. "Heard you took David's junk. Please tell me you're planning to sell it." I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the wardrobe and, for the first time, opened its doors. The inside smelled stronger than the outside, camphor so intense it made my sinuses ache. The interior was divided into sections, a hanging area with a bar of dark wood, shelves above and below, and small drawers built into the sides. Everything was empty except for a single sheet of paper. empty, yellowed, and fragile, tucked into one of the small drawers. I pulled it out carefully. It was covered in Chinese characters, handwritten in brush and ink, the strokes confident and flowing. I couldn't read classical Chinese. My Mandarin was decent for ordering food and asking directions, but this was something else entirely, something old and formal. But I recognized one character, repeated several times. Lin Lin. The family name, David's grandmother's family name, and also mine. No relation, pure coincidence, or what David's grandmother had called inauspicious. We'd had the same surname, which in traditional Chinese culture was bad luck for marriage. She'd blamed all our problems on that, as if the real issue was nominal, rather than the fact that her grandson and I had nothing in common except good credit scores and a shared appreciation for the office. I put the paper back and closed the wardrobe. Then I sat down at the round table, the one with 5 legs and mother-of-pearl inlay, and I started to research. My laptop was a 5-year-old Dell that took forever to boot up, but eventually I was online, typing search terms into Google. Lin Family Furniture Taipei, Qing Dynasty Reproductions, late 19th century Chinese furniture makers. Most of what came up was useless. Auction listings for actual Qing Dynasty pieces, articles about furniture restoration, ads for modern reproductions. But then, on page 7 of the search results, I found something. A blog post from 2019, written by an art history professor at NYU. The post was titled, "The Forgotten Masters, Lin Family Furniture Workshop, 1850 to 1920. I read it 3 times. The professor, Dr. Sarah Chen, had spent years researching the Lin family workshop, tracking down surviving pieces, interviewing descendants of the family, piecing together a history that had been almost completely lost. Her research had culminated in that traveling exhibition I'd seen in my previous life, the one from the National Palace Museum. According to Dr. Chen, the workshop had been started by Lin Jing, a craftsman who'd learned his trade in Beijing before moving to Taiwan in the 1850s. He'd brought with him a deep knowledge of traditional furniture-making techniques and an obsession with perfection. His reproductions weren't meant to deceive. They were meant to preserve, to keep alive techniques and styles that were already disappearing. His son, Lin Wei, had taken over the workshop in 1880 and had been even more talented than his father. Lin Wei had studied painting and calligraphy as well as woodworking, and his furniture incorporated artistic elements that went beyond mere reproduction. He'd been particularly known for his wardrobes and cabinets, which he'd treated as 3-dimensional canvases. The workshop had closed in 1920, after Lin Wei's death. His sons had no interest in continuing the tradition. One became a doctor, one moved to Shanghai, and disappeared during the revolution. The furniture they'd made scattered across Taiwan, China, and eventually the world, as families sold off inheritances, fled wars, started new lives. Most of it was gone now, destroyed, lost, burned, rotting in warehouses no one bothered to check. But some pieces survived. Dr. Chen's blog post included photos of several pieces she'd authenticated as genuine Lin family work. I compared them to the furniture now crowding my apartment, zooming in on details, looking for similarities. The joinery, the way corners met without nails or glue, just wood fitted to wood with mathematical precision. The carving style, dragons with a specific curl to their whiskers, clouds rendered in a particular pattern of swirls. The wood itself, that deep, almost black color that came from Huanghuali wood stained with a traditional mixture Dr. Chen couldn't fully identify, something involving persimmon juice and iron oxide, a recipe lost when the workshop closed. The mother-of-pearl inlay on my table showed the same yellowing pattern as a table pictured in Dr. Chen's blog, the same technique of layering thin sheets of pearl to create depth and dimensionality. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. I had to be sure. I had to get these pieces authenticated. But therein lay the problem. If I took them to an appraiser now, I'd get the same answer I'd gotten in my previous life. Modern reproductions, worth a few $100s at most. The knowledge of Lin family furniture hadn't entered the mainstream yet. Dr. Chen's research was still relatively obscure, known mainly to specialists and academics. The exhibition hadn't happened yet. Wouldn't happen for another 20 years. If I wanted these pieces authenticated, I needed to go to someone who would understand what they were looking at. I needed to go to Dr. Chen. Finding Dr. Chen's contact information took less than 5 minutes. The NYU's website listed her office number, email, and office hours. I drafted an email, deleted it, drafted another one, deleted that too. What was I supposed to say? Dear Dr. Chen, I'm from the future and I know your research is going to be famous. And also, I think I have several pieces of Lin family furniture in my apartment. In the end, I kept it simple. Dear Dr. Chen, my name is Lin Wei. No relation as far as I know. I recently came into possession of several pieces of Chinese furniture that I believe may be from the Lin family workshop in Taipei. I read your blog post about their work and wondered if you might be willing to take a look. I understand you're busy, and I'm happy to work around your schedule. I can bring photos, or if you prefer, you're welcome to come see the pieces in person. Thank you for your time. Best, Ni Lin Wei. I hit send before I could second guess myself. Then I waited. 1 day passed, 2, 3. I went to work. I was a graphic designer at a small marketing firm, a job I'd stumbled into after college and never quite managed to stumble out of. In my previous life, I'd stayed at this firm for another 3 years before being laid off in a restructuring. This time, I knew exactly when the layoffs would happen, knew exactly which projects would fail and which would succeed, knew which clients were about to jump ship. The knowledge should have been useful, should have given me an edge. Instead, it made everything feel hollow. Pointless. What was the point of putting in effort when I knew it wouldn't matter? What was the point of caring about deadlines when I knew the whole company would be sold to a competitor in 2029? I did my work anyway. Mechanically, competently, earning the same lukewarm praise from my boss that I'd earned the first time around. After work, I went home to my apartment full of furniture and tried to figure out what I was doing with my life. On the 4th day, Dr. Chen replied, Dear Lin, thank you for your email. I'd be very interested in seeing what you have. Lin family furniture is quite rare, and most pieces I've studied have been in museums or private collections abroad. The possibility of finding pieces here in New York is exciting. I'm free this Saturday afternoon if that works for you. Please send me your address and I'll stop by around 2 p.m. Best regards, Sarah Chen. Saturday was 3 days away. I spent those 3 days cleaning my apartment like I'd never cleaned it before. I scrubbed floors, wiped down walls. I tried to make the space look less like a warehouse and more like a home. I bought fresh flowers, chrysanthemums because they seemed appropriate, and put them on the round table. I made sure every piece of furniture was dusted, every surface polished. On Saturday morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. despite not setting an alarm. I couldn't eat breakfast. I couldn't sit still. I kept checking the furniture, touching the wood, running my fingers over the carvings as if the pieces might disappear if I looked away too long. At 1:45 p.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door, followed by a knock. I opened the door to find a woman in her 50s, Chinese-American, wearing jeans and an NYU sweatshirt, with reading glasses pushed up onto her head and a messenger bag slung over her shoulder. She was shorter than me, maybe 5'2", but she had the kind of presence that made her seem taller. Lin, she said, smiling. I'm Sarah. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Please. She walked in, and I watched her face change. First, confusion. Why was this apartment so full of furniture? Then interest, as her eyes caught on the wardrobe visible through the bedroom door. Then excitement, barely suppressed as she moved toward the round table. May I? She asked, gesturing toward the table. Of course. She pulled out one of the horseshoe-back chairs and sat down slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal that might spook. Her hands went to the table's edge, fingers tracing the mother-of-pearl inlay. Where did you get this? She asked quietly. My ex-husband's grandmother. She died about 10 years ago, and he inherited her furniture. When we divorced, he offered it to me. Everyone said it was worthless reproductions, so I took it. Dr. Chen looked up at me, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. Everyone was wrong. My heart was pounding. You're sure? I'm 90% sure, and I've only been here 5 minutes. She stood up and moved to the wardrobe in the bedroom. I followed her, watching as she examined it the way I'd examined it, running her hands over the carved dragons, peering at the joinery, opening the doors to smell the camphor interior. She found the paper in the drawer, the one with the handwritten characters. Can you read it? I asked. She pulled out her phone and took several photos before carefully removing the paper. She held it up to the light coming through my window, turning it this way and that. It's a dedication, she said finally, or maybe a maker's mark. The handwriting is definitely from the late Qing period, and the calligraphy style matches other examples I've seen from Lin Wei himself. What does it say? Dr. Chen squinted at the characters. Roughly translated, made in the 18th year of Guangxu, that would be 1892, by Lin Wei of the Lin Family Workshop, Taipei. For the marriage of Miss Chen to Mr. Wang, may their union be blessed with harmony and prosperity. I felt something twist in my chest. A marriage gift. This wardrobe had been made for someone's wedding, crafted with care and skill and hope for the future. And that marriage had probably ended, like most marriages do, one way or another. The wardrobe had outlasted it, had outlasted the people it was made for, their children, their grandchildren. And now it was here, in my apartment, a divorcee's apartment, like some kind of cosmic joke. This is extraordinary, Dr. Chen was saying. She'd put the paper back and was now photographing everything. The wardrobe, the table, the chairs, the cabinet, the screen. May I examine all of the pieces? Please. She spent the next 2 hours going over every inch of the furniture. She pulled out tools from her bag, a magnifying glass, a small flashlight, something that looked like a jeweler's loupe. She took what must have been 300 photos. She made notes on her phone, muttering to herself in Mandarin too rapid for me to follow. I made tea, cheap tea from a box, the only kind I had, and she drank it absently, barely seeming to notice what she was drinking. Finally, as the afternoon light was fading toward evening, she sat down at the round table again and looked at me. I need to be absolutely clear, she said. I'd want to do more extensive testing to be 100% certain. Wood analysis, dating the inlay, examining the finish under microscopy. But, based on what I'm seeing here, I believe all of these pieces are authentic Lin family furniture. Not just from the workshop, but specifically from Lin Wei's hand. This is his work. I sat down across from her. My legs felt weak. What does that mean? I asked. In terms of value? Dr. Chen laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. It was the laugh of someone who'd just been asked to put a price on something priceless. I honestly don't know, she said. The market for Lin family furniture is still developing. Most people don't even know who Lin Wei was. But if I had to guess, based on recent auction results for comparable pieces from the same period, you're looking at somewhere between $50,000 and $200,000 per piece. The room tilted. That's conservative, Dr. Chen said. If the right buyer came along, someone who really understood what these pieces represent, the value could be much higher. And that's now. In 10, 20 years, as more research comes out, as the exhibition I'm planning gains traction. The sky's the limit. I couldn't speak. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her expression serious. Lin, I need to ask you something. What are you planning to do with these pieces? I don't know, I said honestly, because I need you to understand something. These pieces aren't just valuable as objects, they're valuable as history. They're evidence of a tradition that was almost completely lost, a link to a time and place and way of making things that doesn't exist anymore. They belong in a museum, or at least in the hands of someone who understands their significance. I understand, I said. Do you? She wasn't being unkind, just direct. Because right now you have pieces of furniture worth potentially millions of dollars sitting in an apartment in Queens with no security, no climate control, no insurance. If something happened to them, if there was a fire, a flood, if someone broke in, that would be a tragedy not just for you, but for history. She was right, of course. I knew she was right, but I also knew something she didn't. I had 20 years. 20 years before that exhibition, before the mainstream interest, before the prices really started to climb. 20 years to figure out what I was doing, who I was, what I wanted. 20 years to be someone other than the woman who died alone with $347 in her checking account. What if, I said slowly, I wanted to learn more about the furniture, the history, the tradition. What if I wanted to study this? Dr. Chen tilted her head, considering me. Are you asking if you could study with me? Maybe. I don't know. I don't have a formal background in art history or Asian studies or anything like that. I am just a graphic designer who happens to have inherited some furniture. Some furniture? Dr. Chen repeated and smiled. You're being modest. What you have here is a collection, a significant collection. And yes, if you're serious about learning, I'd be happy to teach you. I'm always looking for research assistants, And someone with access to pieces like these, that would be invaluable to my work. I'd have to keep my day job, I said. I can't afford not to. Of course, we could meet once a week, maybe Saturday afternoons like this. I'd teach you how to research provenance, how to document and catalog pieces, how to identify markers of authenticity, and in exchange, she gestured around the apartment. You'd let me study these pieces, take measurements, run tests, include them in my research, and eventually in the exhibition. It was perfect. Too perfect. Like the universe had handed me exactly what I needed exactly when I needed it. Which should have made me suspicious, except I'd stopped believing in coincidences the day I woke up 20 years in my past. Okay, I said. Let's do it. Dr. Chen smiled and held out her hand. Well, welcome to the world of Chinese furniture scholarship. It's incredibly niche and barely pays anything, and you're going to love it. We shook on it. The first thing Dr. Chen taught me was how to look. Most people see furniture as functional objects, she said the following Saturday, as we sat at the round table with books and laptops and cups of tea spread between us. A chair is for sitting, a table is for eating, a wardrobe is for storing clothes, but furniture is also a document. It tells you about the people who made it, the people who used it, the time and place it was created. She picked up one of the horseshoe-backed chairs and turned it upside down, exposing the underside of the seat. Look here, she said, pointing to where the legs met the seat frame. See these marks? These are from the craftsman's tools. Oh, each tool leaves a specific signature. The width of the chisel, the angle of the plane, the pattern of the saw. By studying these marks, we can not only identify who made the piece, but also reconstruct how they worked, what techniques they used. I leaned in, squinting at the marks. They just looked like scratches to me. It takes practice, Dr. Chen said, reading my expression. Your eye needs to be trained. Here, try this. She handed me a magnifying glass and a piece of paper with a photograph printed on it, a close-up of wood grain. This is from a table authenticated as Lin Wei's work, currently in a private collection in Taiwan. Now look at your table with the magnifying glass and compare the grain patterns. What do you see? I looked. At first, nothing. Just wood, dark and smooth, the grain running in parallel lines. But then, slowly, I started to see differences. The grain in the photograph had a slight waviness to it, a rhythm like waves on a shore. The grain on my table had that same rhythm, but also something else. Occasional bursts where the lines seemed to explode outward like a flower blooming. Huanghuali wood, Dr. Chen said when I described what I was seeing, specifically from trees that grew in certain mountainous regions of Hainan Island. The bursts you're seeing are called ghost faces. They're caused by irregularities in the tree's growth, usually where a branch once was. Lin Wei particularly prized wood with prominent ghost faces. He thought they added character. Over the following weeks, she taught me to identify different types of wood, not just Huanghuali, but also Zidin, Jichimu, Nanmu. She taught me about different joinery techniques, different carving styles, different historical periods, and how they influenced furniture design. She taught me how to document pieces properly, taking measurements from multiple angles, photographing under different lighting conditions, noting every detail no matter how small. She taught me how to research, how to chase down references in obscure academic papers, how to contact museum curators and private collectors, how to build a network of scholars who might have information about Lin family furniture. And slowly, piece by piece, we started to reconstruct the history of my collection. The wardrobe, we determined, had been made in 1892 as a wedding gift for a wealthy family in Taipei. We found the family name, Chen, in historical records. I found the marriage announcement in an old newspaper that had been digitized by the National Library of Taiwan. The family had been prosperous merchants, dealers in tea and camphor, which explained the intense camphor smell. The wardrobe had likely spent decades storing the family's most precious silks and furs, absorbing the scent. The round table was older, probably from the 1880s, made when Lin Wei was still learning his father's techniques. It showed slight irregularities in the mother-of-pearl work, places where the inlay didn't quite match up, suggesting an apprentice's hand rather than a master's. The chairs were a set, made as a commission for a doctor's office in Tainan. Dr. Chen found a reference to them in a letter from Lin Wei to a friend, complaining about the difficulty of getting the rattan seats just right. They had to be strong enough to support weight, but also flexible enough to be comfortable. The standing screen was the hardest to trace. The painting was unsigned, and the style didn't match any known artists from the period. Dr. Chen thought it might have been painted by Linway himself. He'd studied painting in his youth, and the brushwork showed competence, if not genius. The subject matter, birds and flowers, was traditional, but there was something about the composition, the way the crane's neck curved, the way the chrysanthemums overlapped, that felt personal rather than formulaic. "It's like he was trying to tell a story," Dr. Chen said, studying the screen through her magnifying glass. "The crane represents longevity, the phoenix represents renewal. The chrysanthemums mean autumn, the end of things, but also resilience. They bloom when other flowers have died. And look here, in the corner." She pointed to a tiny detail I'd never noticed, a small signature, so faded it was almost invisible, in the bottom right corner of one panel. Linway, Linway. His name. His actual signature. "This isn't just a piece of furniture," Dr. Chen said quietly. "This is a work of art. We spent 6 months documenting everything. Dr. Chen brought in specialists, a wood analyst who took tiny core samples to date the pieces, a conservator who examined the finish and recommended treatments to prevent further deterioration, a photographer who took high-resolution images for Dr. Chen's research database." I watched and learned and felt like I was uncovering not just the history of the furniture, but something about myself. In my previous life, I drifted. I'd taken the path of least resistance, accepting whatever came my way without question, a marriage I didn't really want, a job I didn't really like, an apartment I couldn't really afford. I'd told myself I was being practical, mature, responsible. But really, I'd just been afraid. Afraid of making the wrong choice, afraid of standing out, afraid of wanting something too much and not getting it. The furniture was teaching me to want, not in a greedy way, not in a grasping for wealth way, but in a deeper sense, to want knowledge, to want understanding, to want to be part of something larger than myself. Dr. Chen noticed the change. "You have a good eye," she said one Saturday. Soon after I'd correctly identified a piece of furniture in a photograph as late Qing based on the style of the carving. "Have you ever thought about going back to school, getting a degree in art history or Asian studies?" I had thought about it. In my previous life, I'd thought about it constantly. Thought about applying to graduate programs, thought about making a change, thought about doing something meaningful. But I'd never done it. Too expensive, I'd told myself, too risky. What if I couldn't find a job after? What if I wasted years and money and ended up worse off than before? Now those fears seemed small, manageable, because I knew what the alternative was. Dying at 47 with nothing to show for my life except medical bills and regrets. "I've thought about it," I said. Dr. Chen smiled. "NYU has a good program. I could write you a recommendation letter if you decide to apply." "I don't know if I'm ready for that yet." "No rush. The furniture isn't going anywhere." She paused. "Though, actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. About what you're planning to do with the collection." I'd been avoiding thinking about this. The pieces were worth so much money now, even more than Dr. Chen's initial estimate. The wood analyst had confirmed they were authentic, dating to between 1880 and 1895. The conservator had given them excellent condition ratings, especially for pieces their age. Dr. Chen had already had inquiries from collectors and museums who'd heard about the discovery through the academic grapevine. I could sell them all, invest the money, quit my job, do whatever I wanted. But every time I thought about it, I felt sick. "I don't want to sell them," I said. "I wasn't going to suggest you should," Dr. Chen said gently. "But I do think you need to make some decisions about security and conservation. These pieces need to be properly cared for. Climate-controlled environment, UV-protected glass if you display them, insurance that covers their actual value, not just what you paid in storage fees." She was right. I knew she was right. My lease was up for renewal in 3 months. I could move somewhere safer, somewhere with better security, somewhere climate-controlled, but apartments like that were expensive, and my graphic designer salary, while decent, wasn't going to cover it. Unless. "What if I took out a loan?" I asked. "Using the furniture as collateral?" Dr. Chen frowned. "That's risky. If you defaulted, you'd lose the pieces. But if I didn't default, I could use the money to protect them properly, maybe even to go back to school." "It's your decision," Dr. Chen said. "But think carefully. These pieces have survived over 100 years. It would be a shame if they were lost now because of financial pressure. I promised I'd think about it. That night, alone in my apartment, surrounded by wood and history and the ghosts of craftsmen who died long before I was born, I did think about it. In my previous life, I'd made safe choices and died poor. Maybe it was time to make dangerous choices and see where they led. The bank officer looked at me like I'd asked to borrow money to fund a trip to Mars. "You want to take out a loan," he said slowly, "using furniture as collateral." "Yes." "Furniture that you claim is worth over $1 million. Not claim. Hey, it is worth over $1 million. I have authentication documents, appraisals, photographs." He held up a hand. "Ma'am, I'm sure your furniture is very nice, but banks don't typically accept furniture as collateral for large loans. We deal in real estate, securities, assets with established markets, and clear title. These pieces have clear title. They were legally gifted to me in my divorce settlement, and there is an established market. Auction houses have sold comparable pieces for 6 figures, sometimes 7. I have documentation of all of this." I slid a folder across his desk. Inside were Dr. Chen's authentication reports, the conservator's evaluations, printouts of auction results for similar pieces, photographs of every item from every angle. The officer, his nameplate said Robert Chen, no relation to doctor. Chen opened the folder and started reading. I watched his expression change from skeptical to curious to something I couldn't quite identify. "This is actually very thorough," he said, "but I still don't think—" "What if I could get a museum to provide a letter of intent?" I interrupted, "stating that they're interested in acquiring the pieces for their collection? Would that establish the value sufficiently?" He blinked. "Possibly. Do you have such a letter?" "Not yet, but I can get one." This was a bluff. I had no idea if I could get such a letter, but Dr. Chen had mentioned that several museums had expressed interest, and I was betting that interest could be formalized into something a bank would accept. Robert Chen closed the folder and looked at me with what might have been respect. "If you can get a letter of intent from a reputable museum, and if the letter specifies a proposed acquisition price, and if you can provide proof of insurance covering the full value of the pieces, then yes, we might be able to structure something. But I have to tell you, the interest rate would be substantial. Using non-traditional collateral increases the risk to the bank, and that risk gets passed to you in the form of higher rates." "How substantial?" He did some calculations on his computer. For a loan of, say, $100,000, you'd be looking at around 12% APR, monthly payments of approximately $1,500 for 7 years. I did my own mental math. I made $3,200 a month after taxes. Rent was $1,100. Utilities and transportation were another $400. That left me $1,700 for food, insurance, student loans from my undergraduate degree, and everything else. $1,500 a month would leave me $200 for everything else. It was insane. It was impossible. It was also exactly what I needed to do. "Let me get back to you," I said. Dr. Chen made 3 phone calls. The first was to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where she knew a curator in the Asian art department. The curator was interested but non-committal. The Met's acquisition budget was tied up for the next 2 years, but they'd definitely be interested in seeing the pieces once funding opened up. The second was to a smaller museum in Philadelphia that specialized in Asian decorative arts. The curator there was more enthusiastic, but had even less money. They could offer $50,000 for one piece, maybe 2, but definitely not the whole collection. The third call was to a private collector doctor Chen had worked with before, a man named James Wu, who'd made his fortune in tech and now spent it acquiring Chinese antiques. "He's legitimate," Dr. Chen told me, "not like some collectors who just want trophies to show off at parties. James actually cares about the history, the craftsmanship. He's funded museum exhibitions, endowed academic chairs. If he's interested, he'll treat the pieces with respect." James Wu was interested. Very interested. He flew in from San Francisco the following week and spent 4 hours in my apartment, examining every piece with the kind of attention I'd only seen from Dr. Chen. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with silver-framed glasses and the kind of casual, expensive clothes that said money without screaming it. "Extraordinary," he kept saying. "Truly extraordinary." At the end of the 4 hours, He sat down at the round table, the table with 5 legs and mother-of-pearl inlay, and made me an offer. "I'll give you $1.5 million for the collection," he said. "The whole collection. All 6 pieces. Cash, wire transfer, whatever you prefer. I'll also cover all transportation and insurance costs." I felt dizzy. $1.5 million. I could pay off my student loans, buy a house, quit my job, go to graduate school, travel the world, do anything I wanted. I could be free. Or, James Wu continued, if you're not ready to sell, I could provide a letter of intent stating my interest in acquiring the collection for $1.5 million with the understanding that you retain ownership for now. Such a letter would give you leverage for securing loans or other financing, should you need it. He was giving me an out. A way to keep the furniture and still get what I needed. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "Why not just pressure me to sell now?" He smiled. "Because Dr. Chen told me about you, about how you're studying the pieces, learning their history. She thinks you might contribute something valuable to the field given time, and I trust her judgment." He paused. "Also, frankly, I like the idea of these pieces staying with someone who appreciates them. Museums are wonderful, but they're also bureaucracies. Pieces get locked in storage, moved around, deaccessioned. With you, I know they'll be cared for. But eventually, you want to buy them." "Eventually, yes. When you're ready to sell, I'd like first refusal. But there's no timeline on that. Could be next year, could be 20 years from now." He shrugged. I'm patient." I looked around my apartment, at the furniture that had survived over a century, that had outlasted the marriage it was made for, the family that commissioned it, the craftsman who made it. These pieces had been through so much, and they were still here, still beautiful, still telling their stories to anyone who knew how to listen. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He left his card and a draft letter of intent, already filled out with all the details the bank would need. After he left, I sat at the round table for a long time, running my fingers over the mother-of-pearl inlay, tracing the outline of the woman feeding fish, the willow tree, the pavilion. The woman in the scene looked happy. Or maybe she just looked peaceful. It was hard to tell with art this old, this stylized. I wondered if the people who'd commissioned this table had been happy, if the doctor who'd ordered the chairs had healed many patients, if the couple who'd received the wardrobe as a wedding gift had stayed together until death. I wondered if any of them had ever imagined that their furniture would outlast them by so many years, that it would end up in an apartment in Queens in the possession of a woman who'd lived 2 lives. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister. "Mom wants to know if you're coming to dinner Sunday. She's making dumplings." I'd been avoiding family dinners, avoiding my mother's questions about why I'd taken David's junk, about when I was going to start dating again, about my plans for the future, avoiding my sister's concern, her too gentle tone, the way she looked at me like I was fragile. But maybe it was time to stop avoiding. I texted back, "I'll be there." Then I picked up James W.'s card and the letter of intent and put them in a folder with all of Dr. Chen's documentation. I wasn't ready to sell. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I was ready to take the risk. The loan came through. $100,000 at 12% interest, secured by James W.'s letter of intent and an insurance policy that cost me $800 a month by itself. The bank made me sign so many papers, my hand cramped, and Robert Chen looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern, like I was either very brave or very stupid and he couldn't decide which. Maybe I was both. The first thing I did was move. I found a 2-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood, in a building with actual security and climate control that didn't sound like a dying monster. So the rent was $2,100 a month, nearly double what I'd been paying. But the second bedroom was perfect for the furniture. I could set it up as a proper study room, with the wardrobe and the screen and the cabinet arranged like a small museum display. The living room got the table and chairs. My bedroom got the bed I'd bought secondhand and nothing else. I liked the simplicity of it, the way the space felt intentional rather than accidentally sparse. The second thing I did was quit my job. My boss was shocked. "But Lynn, you're one of our best designers, and the market's tough right now, you know that. Are you sure you want to do this?" I was sure. I'd spent enough time in that office, doing work I didn't care about for clients who didn't appreciate it, counting down the hours until I could leave. In my previous life, I'd stayed until the layoffs came, And then I'd spent months unemployed, burning through my savings, applying for jobs that never called back. This time, I was choosing to leave on my own terms. "I'm going back to school," I told him. "Graduate program at NYU. I'm going to study art history." He looked at me like I'd said I was going to study alchemy or astrology, something simultaneously impressive and impractical. "Well," he said finally, "good luck with that." The third thing I did was apply to NYU's master's program in East Asian Studies, with a focus on Chinese art history. My undergraduate transcript wasn't impressive. I'd graduated with a 3.2 GPA from a state school, with a degree in visual communications that I'd chosen mostly because it sounded employable. I had no background in art history, no language skills beyond conversational Mandarin, no research experience, but I had a recommendation letter from Dr. Sarah Chen, and I had a personal statement that began, "I am currently the custodian of 6 pieces of authenticated Lin family furniture, dating from 1880 to 1892, and representing some of the finest examples of late Qing dynasty craftsmanship known to exist. This collection has taught me that furniture is not just functional. It is a form of historical documentation, a repository of cultural memory, and a bridge between past and present." I got an interview. The interviewer was a professor I'd never heard of, a specialist in Ming Dynasty painting who looked at my portfolio of photographs and documentation with what I thought was skepticism. "This is impressive work," he said, flipping through the pages. But most of it is Dr. Chen's research, isn't it? Her authentication, her analysis. What's your contribution?" I'd prepared for this question. "I'm the one who recognized what the pieces were," I said. "When I inherited this furniture, everyone told me it was worthless. Professional appraisers, family members, even my ex-husband who'd grown up with these pieces, they all believed they were modern reproductions. I was the one who looked past that, who did the research, who reached out to Dr. Chen. Because you read her blog post. Yes, and because I was willing to question the consensus. That's what scholarship is, isn't it? Looking at something everyone thinks they understand and asking, but what if we're wrong?" The professor smiled slightly. "That's one definition. Tell me, what do you hope to do with a degree in East Asian Studies? What's your goal?" In my previous life, I would have said something safe and vague. I'm passionate about learning. I want to make a contribution to the field. Generic phrases that meant nothing. This time, I told the truth. "I want to understand these pieces," I said, "not just as objects, but as part of a larger story. I want to know about the Lin family workshop, about the craftsmen who made this furniture, about the people who commissioned it and used it and passed it down through generations. I want to trace the networks of trade and culture that brought these pieces from Taipei to Queens. And I want to share that knowledge, make it accessible, help other people see what I see when I look at a piece of furniture." That's ambitious. I know, but I have 20 years. I paused. I'm planning to dedicate at least the next 20 years to this work. The slip didn't seem to register. The professor just nodded and made a note on his pad. "Well, Miss Lin, I'll be honest. Your academic background is not ideal for our program. Normally, we look for students with undergraduate degrees in Asian studies, art history, or related fields. However, your unique position as custodian of this collection, combined with Dr. Chen's strong recommendation, makes you an interesting candidate." He looked up at me. "If we were to accept you, would you be able to fund your studies? Our program offers limited funding for master's students." This was the question I'd been dreading. "I have a loan," I said. "It's enough to cover tuition and living expenses for 2 years, if I'm careful. And after that, I'll figure it out." Another small smile. "Well, we'll let you know our decision within 2 weeks." I got the acceptance letter 10 days later. The fourth thing I did, the thing that surprised me most, was start dating again. Not because I wanted to exactly, not because I felt ready or excited about the prospect of putting myself out there, but because Dr. Chen invited me to a gallery opening and I said yes, and at the gallery I met someone. His name was Michael. He was a photographer, specializing in architectural photography, and we got to talking because he was taking pictures of a Tang Dynasty ceramic horse, and I made a comment about the glaze technique. "You know about ceramics?" he asked. "A little. I'm studying Chinese art history." "Seriously? That's cool. I mostly shoot modern architecture." "No, But I've been trying to expand into museum work. The pay's terrible, but the access is incredible. We talked for an hour. He was easy to talk to, funny without trying too hard, genuinely interested in things. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without the usual spiral of anxiety about what it meant, whether he was serious, whether I was good enough. We went on a date, then another, then another. It was nothing like my relationship with David had been. David and I had dated because it seemed like the logical progression, because we were both at the age where our friends were pairing off, because we fit together well enough on paper. We'd never had much passion, but we'd never fought much either. It was comfortable, in the way that a slightly too small shoe is comfortable, fine until you try to walk any real distance. Michael was different. He challenged me, asked questions I didn't know the answers to, pushed me to articulate why I cared about the things I cared about. He came over to my apartment and spent 2 hours photographing the furniture, capturing angles and details I'd never noticed. He made me look at familiar things with fresh eyes. "This is museum quality work," he said, reviewing the photos on his camera. Like, literally, museums would pay good money for photographs like these? Really? Really, you should think about publishing something. A coffee table book, maybe. The Furniture of Lin Wei or something. I'd buy it. The idea lodged in my brain and wouldn't leave. A book. Documentation of the collection, not just for scholars, but for everyone. Beautiful photographs, accessible text. Oh, a way to share these pieces with the world without having to sell them. I mentioned it to Dr. Chen the next time we met. "That's an excellent idea," she said immediately. "And timely. I've been thinking about the exhibition we discussed, the traveling show from the National Palace Museum. If we can coordinate the publication with the exhibition, it could generate significant interest. Museums love having complementary materials for their shows." "But the exhibition is years away," I said. "You said it wouldn't happen until the 2040s. Dr. Chen looked at me oddly. "I don't think I said that. The museum has actually been in touch about possibly doing something in the next 5 to 7 years, depending on funding. Where did you get the 2040s timeline?" I froze. I'd slipped. I'd revealed knowledge I shouldn't have. "I must have misunderstood," I said quickly, "or misremembered. 5 to 7 years makes more sense." Dr. Chen was still looking at me with that odd expression, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Lynn," she said slowly, "sometimes you say things that make me think you know more than you're letting on, about the market for Chinese furniture, about how values are going to change. Like you can see the future." I forced a laugh. "I wish. No, I read a lot, research a lot, you've taught me well." She didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. But I was rattled. I'd been so careful for so long, never mentioning specific future events, never revealing that I'd already lived this timeline once, but the longer I stayed in this second life, the harder it became to keep track of what I should know and what I shouldn't. That night, I lay in bed in my quiet bedroom, listening to the hum of the climate control system, and thought about time. In my previous life, I'd treated time like an enemy, something that was always running out, always slipping away. I'd been 37 when David left, and I'd felt like my life was over, like I'd missed my chance at happiness. I'd spent the next 10 years proving myself right, making choices that ensured I'd be alone and struggling. Now I was 37 again, but with 20 years of knowledge, 20 years of mistakes I could avoid, I should have felt powerful in control. Instead, I felt unmoored. Because what if I changed too much? What if by avoiding my old mistakes, I created new ones? What if the universe had sent me back for a specific reason, and by pursuing my own path, I was missing the point entirely? I got up and went to the second bedroom, where the furniture waited in the darkness. I didn't turn on the light, I just stood there, letting my eyes adjust, until I could make out the shapes. The wardrobe with its carved dragons, the screen with its faded birds, the cabinet with its mountain scene. These pieces had survived over a century. They'd survived wars, revolutions, migrations, changes in government and culture and taste. They'd survived because they were well-made, yes, but also because people had chosen to keep them, to care for them, to pass them on. Someone had made the choice, over and over again across generations, to say, this matters. This is worth preserving. That's what I was doing now. Not just with the furniture, but with my life. I was choosing what mattered. I was choosing what was worth preserving. And maybe that was enough. Graduate school was harder than I expected. Not intellectually, though that was challenging enough. Learning classical Chinese, studying art historical methodologies, reading hundreds of pages a week in languages I was only just becoming proficient in. But emotionally, psychologically, being the oldest student in every class, being the one who'd come to academia late, who didn't have the same foundation as everyone else. The other students were mostly in their early 20s, fresh from undergraduate programs at prestigious schools, fluent in multiple languages, already published in academic journals. They talked casually about semesters abroad in Beijing or Taipei, about research fellowships and grants, about professors they'd studied with, and conferences they'd attended. I was the odd one out. The graphic designer turned furniture collector turned graduate student. The divorce. The woman living on borrowed money and borrowed time. But I had something they didn't. I had the furniture. My thesis project, under Dr. Chen's supervision, was a comprehensive study of the Lin family workshop and their contribution to late Qing dynasty furniture making. It was ambitious, probably too ambitious for a master's thesis, but Dr. Chen encouraged me to think big. "This is important work," she said, "and you're in a unique position to do it. You have access to pieces that other scholars can only dream of seeing." I spent 2 years measuring, documenting, analyzing. I learned to read the furniture like text, to see in every joint and carving a statement of intent from the craftsman. I learned to date pieces by their construction techniques, to identify different hands by their carving styles, to trace the evolution of the workshop's aesthetic philosophy. I also learned to read classical Chinese well enough to work through the archival materials Dr. Chen had collected. Letters, account books, newspaper advertisements, fragments of text that, when pieced together, told a story. Linwei had been a perfectionist. His letters complained constantly about the quality of materials available, about clients who didn't understand the time required for proper work, about apprentices who wouldn't learn. But they also revealed his pride in his craft, his belief that furniture could be art, his hope that his work would outlast him. He'd been right about that last part, at least. One letter in particular stuck with me. It was written in 1910, when Linwei was in his 60s, to a friend who'd asked why he didn't retire. "To stop working would be to stop living," he'd written. "When I shape wood, I am shaping time itself. I am taking something that grew for decades, centuries even, and giving it new purpose, new meaning. What greater legacy could there be than this?" I thought about that letter often, about legacy, about purpose, about what we leave behind when we're gone. In my previous life, I'd left nothing. No children, no great works, no mark on the world. Just a body that was cremated, and ashes that my sister scattered somewhere. I'd never asked where, and she'd never told me. This time, I was determined to leave something. Even if it was just a thesis, just a contribution to an obscure field that most people didn't care about, it would be something. Michael took the photographs for my thesis. He spent weeks in my apartment setting up lights, adjusting angles, capturing every detail. He photographed the furniture in its entirety, then in pieces, then in extreme close-up. The grain of the wood, the tool marks, the joinery, the wear patterns that showed how the pieces had been used over the years. "You know what's beautiful about this?" he said one evening as he was reviewing the day's shots. "It's not just the craftsmanship, though. That's incredible. It's the humanity. You can see the people in these pieces. The person who carved this dragon put so much energy into it, so much care. And the people who used this furniture, who sat in these chairs, stored their clothes in this wardrobe. They left marks too. Scratches, wear patterns, tiny imperfections that tell you how they lived." He was right. The furniture was a record of lives lived, generations of use and care. And now it was part of my life too, my story woven into the same wood that had held so many others. "You should submit to the Winterthur," Dr. Chen said when she read my thesis draft. "They have a special issue coming up on furniture studies. This would be perfect. Winterthur, the premier journal for American furniture and decorative arts, published by the museum of the same name. Getting published there would be a huge deal, especially for a master's student. It was also a huge risk. Academic publishing was competitive, brutal, unforgiving. Rejections were common, acceptances rare, but I'd already taken so many risks. What was one more? I submitted the article, Beyond Reproduction, the Lin Family Workshop, and the Evolution of Late Qing Furniture Making. 6 months later, I got the acceptance. Not just acceptance, enthusiastic acceptance. The editor wrote that my article was groundbreaking, that it challenged conventional understandings of Chinese furniture history, that it opened new avenues for scholarship. Dr. Chen cried when I showed her the email. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "You've accomplished in 2 years what takes most scholars a decade or more." I didn't tell her that I'd had an advantage, that I'd known what to look for because I'd already seen the future, already knew where the field was heading. I just accepted the praise and tried to feel like I deserved it. The article came out in the fall of my second year of graduate school. Oh, and the response was immediate. Emails from scholars around the world wanting to know more about the collection, about my research, about whether the pieces would be available for study, invitations to present at conferences, to contribute to edited volumes, to collaborate on projects, and offers to buy. So many offers. Collectors, museums, dealers, all of them wanting a piece of the Lin family furniture, offering prices that made my head spin. $200,000 for the wardrobe, $150,000 for the table, $100,000 for the screen. I said no to all of them because something had shifted in me. When I'd first accepted the furniture, it had been a gamble, a desperate attempt to change my life. But now, after 2 years of living with these pieces, studying them, understanding them, they'd become more than just assets. They'd become part of who I was. Oh, Michael understood. "You're not keeping them because of the money," he said one night as we sat at the round table eating takeout. "You're keeping them because they're yours. Because you're the one who saw what they were when no one else did." "Is that selfish?" I asked. Maybe, but maybe that's okay. Sometimes the selfish choice is also the right choice. He reached across the table and took my hand. We'd been dating for almost 2 years now. Not living together yet. We'd both agreed we weren't ready for that. But together in all the ways that mattered. He knew about my previous life, about the rebirth. I'd told him 6 months into our relationship, expecting him to think I was crazy to run for the door. Instead, he just nodded and said, "That explains a lot, actually. You believe me? I believe that you believe it. And honestly, it doesn't matter whether it's literally true or whether it's a delusion or a metaphor or whatever. You lived one life that didn't work out, and now you're living a different life that does. That's true regardless of the mechanism." I'd never loved him more than in that moment. Now, sitting at Linway's table, eating lo mein out of containers, I thought about the craftsman who'd made this piece, about the hours he'd spent selecting the wood, cutting and shaping it, inlaying the mother of pearl, finishing the surface to that perfect dark gleam. He'd made it for strangers, for a doctor he'd probably never met, but he'd made it with care anyway, with attention to detail, with the understanding that his work would outlast him. Maybe that was the point. Not to be remembered personally, but to create something that would continue existing, continue mattering long after you were gone. "I've been thinking," Michael said, interrupting my thoughts, "about the book project. The photography is done, you've got the research, Dr. Chen's on board. What's stopping us from actually doing it?" "Money," I said immediately. "Publishing a book costs money. Design, printing, distribution. What if we crowdfunded it?" I looked at him. "Seriously? Why not? You've got a following now after the article. People are interested in this stuff. We could do a Kickstarter, offer different reward tiers, digital copies, hardback copies, limited editions with signed prints of the photographs. I bet we could raise enough to at least do a small print run." The idea was crazy. It was also brilliant. "Let me talk to Dr. Chen," I said. Dr. Chen loved the idea. Within a week, we had a plan. Michael would handle the photography and design. I would write the text, part scholarly analysis, part personal narrative, part meditation on craft and legacy. Dr. Chen would contribute an introduction, lending academic credibility to the project. We set up the Kickstarter with a goal of $25,000, enough to print 500 copies of a high-quality hardback book with premium paper and excellent color reproduction for the photographs. We launched on a Wednesday. By Friday, we'd hit our goal. By the following Wednesday, we'd raised $150,000. I couldn't believe it. Thousands of people, most of them strangers, were willing to pay money to read about furniture. about craftsmanship, about a workshop that had closed over 100 years ago. "People are hungry for this," Dr. Chen said, reviewing the backer comments, "for connection to the past, for understanding about how things are made, for stories about beauty and care in a world that feels increasingly cheap and disposable." She was right. The comments were full of people talking about their own experiences with inherited furniture, with objects that connected them to family history, with the desire to create something lasting. We ended up raising $180,000. With that money, we printed 2,000 copies of the book, The Furniture of Linwei, Craft, Memory, and Legacy in Late Qing Dynasty Taiwan, and still had enough left over to fund Dr. Chen's research for the next 2 years. The book shipped in the spring of my 3rd year of graduate school. The reviews were extraordinary. Art historians praised the scholarship, design magazines loved the photography. Even mainstream media picked it up. The New York Times ran a feature about the furniture that was almost thrown away, the story of how I'd recognized the value in pieces everyone else had dismissed. And then, something unexpected happened. The National Palace Museum in Taiwan reached out. They'd seen the book. They'd read my article. They wanted to do an exhibition, not in 5 years, not in 20 years, but now. The Forgotten Masters. Furniture from the Lin family workshop to open in 18 months. They wanted to borrow my pieces, all of them. The contract arrived by courier. 47 pages of legal text outlining the terms under which the National Palace Museum would borrow, transport, insure, display, and return my furniture. I sat at the round table, Linwei's table, and read every word. The museum would pay for everything: custom crating, climate-controlled transport, armed security, insurance valued at $3.2 million for the full collection. The pieces would be displayed for 6 months in Taipei, then travel to 3 other venues: Tokyo, Seoul, and finally New York, ending at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Total exhibition period, 2 years. 2 years during which I wouldn't see the furniture that had become the center of my life. Dr. Chen sat across from me, watching my face. "You don't have to say yes," she said quietly. "No one would blame you if you wanted to keep them here, keep them private. But this is the opportunity of a lifetime, not just for your career, though it would certainly help with that, but for the furniture itself. These pieces have been hidden for so long, hidden in storage, hidden in apartments, hidden from the world. This would be their moment, their chance to be seen and appreciated by hundreds of thousands of people." "What would Linwei want?" I asked. Dr. Chen smiled. "I think he'd want his work to be seen. He was an artist, after all. Artists create for an audience." I thought about the letter I'd read, the one where Linwei talked about shaping time, about legacy. He'd made these pieces to last, to matter, to continue existing long after he was gone. Maybe sending them out into the world was how they'd continue to matter. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Conservators came to evaluate each piece, documenting every scratch, every mark, every area of wear. They took samples for analysis, created detailed condition reports, discussed treatment plans for minor issues that needed addressing before the pieces could travel. Custom crates were built, each one designed specifically for its piece, with foam supports and climate monitoring and shock absorption systems that cost more than my first car. Photographers came, not Michael this time, but museum photographers with specialized equipment, and took thousands of high-resolution images for the exhibition catalog. And I wrote. The museum wanted a personal essay for the catalog, something about how I'd come to own the collection, what it meant to me. But I couldn't write about the rebirth, about dying and coming back, about knowing the future. So instead, I wrote about recognition, about seeing value where others saw none, about choosing to care for something even when everyone said it was worthless. "It's beautiful," the curator said when she read the draft. "Very moving. But I wonder, and please don't take this the wrong way, if you could add more about the personal cost. You took out a loan to protect these pieces, you went back to school, you changed your whole life. That sacrifice is part of the story." She was right. The story wasn't just about the furniture. It was about what I'd given up, what I'd risked to keep it. I rewrote the essay. This time, I was honest about the fear. The sleepless nights wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The months of eating ramen because my loan payments left me with almost nothing. The looks from family and friends who thought I was crazy. But also the joy. The satisfaction of understanding something deeply, the connection to history, to craft, though to people long dead who'd cared about the same things I cared about. Better, the curator said. Much better. The crating happened on a Tuesday. The crew arrived at 8 a.m. with a truck and equipment and an air of professional efficiency. They worked quickly, carefully, wrapping each piece in archival tissue, securing them in the custom crates, loading everything into the truck. I watched my apartment empty out. First the wardrobe, so large it barely fit through the door, then the table, the chairs, the cabinet, the screen. One by one, the pieces that had filled my life for the past 3 years disappeared into boxes, into the truck, into the future. Michael stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. The apartment felt enormous and empty, like a house after a funeral. Just my bed, my desk, my few personal belongings. The furniture had been crowding me out of my own space, but now that it was gone, I missed it intensely. Dr. Chen had warned me this would be hard. "It's like sending your children off to college," she'd said. "You know it's the right thing. You know they need to go out into the world, but it still hurts to watch them leave." That night, Michael and I ordered pizza and sat on the floor of my empty living room, eating directly from the box because I didn't have a table anymore. "What are you going to do with all this space?" he asked. "I have no idea." "You could get new furniture." "I don't want new furniture." "You could move somewhere smaller, save money." "Maybe." But I knew I wouldn't. This apartment, with its climate control and security and high rent, had been chosen for the furniture. Without the furniture, it didn't make sense. But I wasn't ready to leave it yet. Wasn't ready to let go of this last connection to the pieces. "Or," Michael said carefully, "I could move in. We could split the rent, make the space work for both of us. I could set up a darkroom in the second bedroom. You could use it as an office when I'm not printing." I looked at him. We'd been dancing around this conversation for months, both of us aware that our relationship had reached a point where it either needed to deepen or end. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I'm kind of a mess right now." "You're always kind of a mess. That's one of the things I love about you." It was the first time he'd said the word love. "I love you too," I said. We finished the pizza. We cleaned up the boxes and paper plates. We made plans for how to arrange the apartment, whose stuff would go where, how we'd merge our lives. And then we went to bed, in my half-empty apartment, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, in either life. Hope. The exhibition opened in Taipei in October. Dr. Chen and I flew over for the opening. Michael wanted to come too, but we couldn't afford 3 tickets, and he had a big shoot scheduled that he couldn't reschedule. So it was just the 2 of us, teacher and student, standing in the National Palace Museum at the exhibition preview. The gallery was perfect. White walls, carefully controlled lighting, each piece displayed with enough space to breathe to be seen from all angles. Wall text in Chinese and English explained the history of the Lin family workshop, the techniques they'd used, the significance of each piece. And my furniture, Lin Wei's furniture, was the centerpiece. The wardrobe stood in the center of the room, dramatically lit, so the carved dragons seemed to move in the shifting shadows. The table and chairs were arranged as if waiting for someone to sit down for tea. The screen was mounted on a wall, backlit to show the delicate details of the painting. People were already gathering. Even though the official opening wasn't for another hour, museum staff, journalists, collectors, scholars, all of them moving slowly through the gallery, stopping to take photos, to read the wall text, to marvel at the craftsmanship. I heard my name mentioned several times, saw people pointing to the essay in the catalog, the one where I'd written about recognition and risk and choosing to care. "You did this," Dr. Chen said beside me. "You made this happen." "We did this," I corrected. She smiled. "Okay, we did this." The opening was a success. Hundreds of people came, including several descendants of the Lin family who'd heard about the exhibition and traveled from across Taiwan to see their ancestors' work. One elderly woman, Lin Wei's great-great-granddaughter, stood in front of the wardrobe and cried. "I never knew," she said, speaking through a translator. "I never knew he made such beautiful things. The family lost everything during the war. All his furniture was gone. I thought it was all destroyed." I told her there were 6 pieces that survived, that these weren't the only examples of his work still in existence. "But they're the ones that came home," she said, "back to Taiwan where they were made." Thank you for bringing them home. I hadn't thought of it that way. To me, the furniture belonged in my apartment in Queens, where I'd rescued it, studied it, cared for it. But she was right. This was its home. This was where Lin Wei had worked, where he'd shaped the wood, carved the dragons, inlaid the mother of pearl. The pieces had been on a 100-year journey, and now they'd completed a circle. The exhibition traveled exactly as planned: Taipei, Tokyo, Seoul, and finally New York. I saw it 3 times. Once in Taipei at the opening, once in Tokyo where I gave a lecture about Lin family furniture, and once in New York at the Met, where the exhibition closed after a record-breaking 6-month run. Each time I saw my furniture differently. In Taipei, I saw them as historical objects. Saw pieces of Taiwanese heritage that had been lost and found. In Tokyo, I saw them as art, displayed alongside other masterworks of Chinese furniture, holding their own against pieces from the Forbidden City and the Summer Palace. In New York, I saw them as mine, not in the sense of ownership. I'd learned that you don't really own things like this. You just care for them for a while before passing them on. But mine in the sense of connection, of understanding, of seeing beyond the surface to the stories embedded in the wood. The exhibition closed on a Sunday. Monday morning, the pieces were crated up again and transported back to my apartment. I'd prepared this time. Michael and I had rearranged the space, making room for everything. The wardrobe went back in the second bedroom, which was now both his darkroom and my office. The table and chairs went back in the living room. The screen and cabinet went along one wall, creating a sort of gallery space. When everything was uncrated and arranged, the conservator who'd supervised the transport walked through the apartment, checking each piece against her condition reports. "Everything looks good," she said finally. "No damage from the travel. The pieces are in better condition now than when they left, actually. The museum's conservation team did some excellent stabilization work." After she left, I walked through my apartment, touching each piece, reacquainting myself with them. They felt different, or maybe I felt different. 2 years ago, I'd been terrified. Terrified of making the wrong choice, of losing everything, of dying alone again. Now, I was still scared sometimes, still uncertain about the future, but it was a different kind of fear. An active fear, the kind that comes from doing things rather than avoiding them. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Chen. "Congratulations on getting your furniture back. Want to get coffee this week and discuss the book project?" Book project. She'd been talking about this for months. A comprehensive monograph on Lin family furniture, building on my article and the exhibition catalog, but going deeper, more scholarly. A book that would establish the field, set the standard for future research. A book that would take years to write. I texted back, yes. 5 years after the exhibition closed, I defended my dissertation. Not a master's thesis this time, but a PhD dissertation. Craft and Commerce, the Lin Family Workshop, and the Furniture Trade in Late Qing Taiwan, 1850 to 1920. 300 pages of research, analysis, and argument. 5 years of work building on everything I'd learned, everything Dr. Chen had taught me, everything the furniture itself had revealed. The defense lasted 2 hours. My committee asked hard questions, challenged my interpretations, pushed me to defend my claims. But I was ready. I knew this material better than I knew almost anything else. When it was over, when they'd asked their final questions and dismissed me to deliberate, I stood in the hallway outside the conference room and thought about the woman I'd been in my previous life. That woman had died at 47 with nothing to show for it. This woman, me, was 44 years old with a PhD, a published book, a traveling exhibition, and a collection of furniture that had changed the course of Chinese furniture studies. Also, a husband. Michael and I had gotten married the year before, a small ceremony in Central Park with just family and close friends. Dr. Chen had officiated. She'd gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion, which had made everyone laugh. We'd served the reception meal at my apartment, at Lin Wei's table, which somehow felt appropriate. A table made for celebration, for gathering, being used exactly as intended. My mother had cried. Not because she was happy, though she said she was, but because she'd thought I'd missed my chance, that after the divorce from David I'd be alone forever. She didn't understand that I'd needed to be alone for a while, needed to figure out who I was outside of someone else's expectations. My sister had been more understanding. "You're different now," she'd said at the wedding. "Happier, more yourself." She was right. I was different. And it wasn't just because of the furniture, though that was part of it. It was because I'd chosen to be different. I'd chosen risk over safety, passion over comfort, meaning over convenience. The committee called me back in. "Congratulations, Dr. Lin," the chair said, smiling. "Your dissertation is accepted." Dr. Lin. I'd never thought I'd hear those words applied to me. I called Michael first, then Dr. Chen, then my mother. Everyone was excited, proud, celebratory, but underneath my own excitement was a strange feeling, like I'd reached the end of something and didn't know what came next. Dr. Chen met me for dinner that night at a restaurant near campus. "So," she said after we'd ordered. "Whoa, what now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I should probably look for a job, teaching positions somewhere, or maybe museum work." "You could, or you could stay at NYU. The department's looking for someone to teach Chinese art history, and I happen to know the hiring committee would be very interested in someone with your expertise." I looked at her. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm telling you that if you applied, you'd be a strong candidate. The decision would ultimately be the committee's, but yes, I think you'd have a good chance." A tenure-track position at NYU, teaching, researching, continuing the work I'd been doing for the past 5 years. It was everything I could have wanted. "What about the furniture?" I asked. Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" "I still have it, all 6 pieces. And I still don't know what to do with them long term. Keep them, sell them, donate them to a museum? What do you want to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? In my previous life, I'd never had things worth keeping. Everything I'd owned had been temporary, replaceable, meaningless. I'd lived like I was always ready to move, to start over, to walk away. This life, I had chosen to hold on, to commit, to say, "This matters, and I'm keeping it." But maybe there was a middle path. "What if," I said slowly, "I donated them to NYU, to the department, for teaching and research? They'd still be here, I could still study them, but they'd be accessible to students and scholars, and they'd be protected, properly conserved, insured." Dr. Chen smiled. "That's a beautiful idea. The department would be thrilled. We could create a dedicated study room, maybe even a small gallery space, the Lin family furniture collection." "No," I said, "just the collection. I don't need my name on it. But it should be acknowledged that you're the donor, that you're the one who recognized their value and preserved them." "Okay, but nothing flashy, just a small plaque." We shook on it, the same way we'd shaken hands 5 years ago when we'd agreed to work together. The donation process took 6 months. Appraisals, legal documents, tax forms, agreements about access and use. The furniture had to be valued for tax purposes, which meant another round of authentication, more conservative estimates, more experts weighing in. The final valuation came in at $3.8 million for the collection. I'd turned down offers higher than that over the years. But seeing the number in an official document still made me dizzy. That was what I was giving away, what I was choosing not to keep. Michael thought I was crazy. "We could sell them," he said, "not for the first time. Invest the money, buy a house, have financial security for the rest of our lives." "I know," I said, "but that's not what they're for." "What are they for?" I thought about Lin Wei, about his belief that his work would outlast him, about the woman in my previous life, dying alone with nothing to show for it, about the choice I'd made 5 years ago to take a risk, to care about something beyond my own immediate comfort. "They're for learning," I said finally, "for connecting us to the past, for showing that craftsmanship and care and beauty still matter." Michael looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. "Okay. But I'm keeping the prints I made. Those are mine. Deal." The furniture moved out of my apartment for the second time on a Wednesday in spring. This time, I wasn't sad. I was ready. Ready for the next chapter, whatever it looked like. The department created a beautiful space for the collection, a climate-controlled room on the 3rd floor with specialized lighting and security. The pieces were arranged much like they'd been in my apartment: the wardrobe against one wall, the table and chairs in the center, the screen and cabinet creating a sense of enclosure. A small plaque on the door read, "The Lin Family Furniture Collection, donated by Dr. Lin Wei in honor of the craftsman whose work connects us to the past." Students came, scholars came. People who'd seen the exhibition and wanted to see the pieces again came. And I came several times a week to teach classes in that room, to let students examine the furniture firsthand, to share everything I'd learned about joinery and carving and the philosophy embedded in wood. Dr. Chen was right. I did get the teaching position at NYU. I taught courses on Chinese art history, on material culture, on the relationship between craft and identity. My classes were popular, probably because I taught them the way I wished someone had taught me. Not as abstract theory, but as concrete practice, as something you could touch and feel and understand through your hands as much as your mind. And I kept researching. The monograph on Lin family furniture came out 2 years later, 600 pages, published by a university press, illustrated with Michael's photographs. It was dense, scholarly, so probably boring to anyone who wasn't already interested in Chinese furniture. But it sold well for an academic book, and more importantly, it became the definitive work on the subject. Other scholars cited it, built on it, used it as a foundation for their own research. Lin Wei had shaped time by working with wood. I was shaping time by working with words. I was 59 years old when I got the diagnosis. The doctor, young, earnest, probably fresh out of medical school, sat across from me in the examination room and used phrases like genetic condition and manageable with medication and caught it early, very lucky. I wasn't surprised. I'd known this was coming. In my previous life, I died from this, an undiagnosed heart condition that had finally caught up with me at 47. This time, I'd been getting regular checkups for years, monitoring my heart health, watching for the warning signs. And when they appeared, the occasional irregular heartbeat, the shortness of breath after climbing stairs, I'd gone straight to a cardiologist. "You'll need to take these daily," the doctor said, handing me a prescription. "And we'll want to monitor you every 3 months. But with proper management, there's no reason you can't live a normal lifespan." A normal lifespan? In my previous life, I'd lived 47 years. In this life, I'd already lived 59, 12 years longer than before. 12 extra years. I'd used them well. Michael drove me home from the appointment. We didn't talk much. We'd been married long enough that silence between us was comfortable rather than awkward. At home, I took the first pill with a glass of water and thought about time. I was 59. In my previous life, I'd still have another 6 years before the heart attack that killed me. But I'd lived those 6 years alone, miserable, struggling. This time, I had a husband who loved me. I had a career that fulfilled me. I had friends, students, a community of scholars who respected my work. I had a life worth living. "You okay?" Michael asked, coming into the kitchen. "Yeah," I said, just thinking. About how different things are this time. He knew what I meant. I'd told him about my previous life years ago, about dying and waking up 20 years in the past. He'd believed me. Or at least he'd believed that I believed it, which amounted to the same thing. "Better?" he asked. "Much better." That night, I went to campus to visit the furniture. I had my own key to the collection room, one of the perks of being both the donor and a faculty member. I let myself in after hours when the building was quiet and empty. The furniture waited in the darkness. I turned on the lights, and they seemed to wake up, the dark wood gleaming under the specialized bulbs. I sat down at the table, Lin Wei's table, and put my hands on the cool surface. I'd sat at this table hundreds, maybe thousands of times over the past 22 years. I'd eaten meals at it, graded papers at it, written articles and books at it. I'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries at it. I'd had conversations that changed my life at it. And before me, others had used it. The doctor who'd commissioned it, his patients, their families. Generations of people, each one leaving their mark in subtle ways. Wear patterns, tiny scratches, the accumulated patina of use. The table had outlasted all of them. It would outlast me too. That thought should have been depressing, but it wasn't. It was comforting. The table would continue, would serve new purposes, would connect future generations to the past, just as it had connected me. My phone buzzed. A text from a former student. "Dr. Lin, I just got accepted to a conservation program in London. Thank you for all your encouragement." I smiled and texted back congratulations. Over the years, I'd taught hundreds of students. Most of them moved on to other things, law school, business, tech jobs, but a few caught the bug, the same obsession with furniture and craft and history that had caught me. Those students were my legacy. Just as the furniture was Linway's legacy, I turned off the lights and locked the door behind me. At home, Michael was in his dark room developing prints. I could hear the timer beeping, the splash of chemicals in trays. He'd retired from commercial photography 5 years ago and now only did personal projects, architectural studies mostly, capturing buildings in that moment just before dawn when the light was perfect. I made tea and sat in the living room, which was furnished now with mid-century modern pieces we'd collected over the years. Nothing as valuable or historically significant as Linway's furniture, but comfortable, lived in, ours. My phone rang. Dr. Chen. "Lynn, I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all. What's up?" "I just got word from the National Palace Museum. They're planning a 20th anniversary exhibition for 2044, 20 years after the original Forgotten Masters show. They want to include your collection again, plus any new pieces that have been discovered in the meantime." 2044. I would be 73 years old. In my previous life, I'd been dead for 26 years by then. "That sounds wonderful," I said. "Would you be willing to write the catalog essay again? They specifically requested you." "Of course." After we hung up, I thought about the exhibition. 20 years from now, the furniture would travel the world again, would be seen by a new generation of people who'd never heard of Linway or the Lin Family Workshop. And I would still be here to see it. That was the gift of the rebirth, I realized. Not the chance to get rich or famous, not the ability to avoid mistakes. Just time. More time to learn, to grow, to connect, to matter. I'd use that time well. I'd saved furniture that would have been lost. I'd built a career doing work I loved. I'd found love when I'd given up on it. I'd created something, scholarship, teaching, a community of people who cared about the same things I cared about. It wasn't a perfect life. I still had student loans, though much smaller now. Michael and I still fought sometimes about stupid things, like whose turn it was to do dishes. I still had bad days when I felt like I wasn't good enough, wasn't doing enough. But it was a good life, a meaningful life, a life worth living. I was 78 years old when I died. Not from a heart attack this time. The medication and monitoring had kept that at bay for nearly 20 years. Instead, I died peacefully in my sleep, in my bed, in the apartment Michael and I had lived in for 45 years. Michael found me in the morning. He said later that I looked peaceful, that I was smiling. I hope that's true. My funeral was small, just family and close friends, exactly as I'd requested. Dr. Chen gave the eulogy. She was 89 by then, still sharp, still teaching, still pushing the field forward. Linway, the craftsman, not our Linway, though the resemblance is remarkable, believed that furniture could outlast the people who made it. That craft could be a form of immortality, Dr. Chen said. Our Linway believed the same thing. But she understood that scholarship could do this too, that by studying and preserving and teaching, we could connect past and future, could ensure that knowledge doesn't die with us. After the funeral, my family gathered at my apartment to sort through my things. There wasn't much. I'd never been one for accumulating possessions. Clothes, books, some photographs, Michael's cameras and darkroom equipment, my research notes and manuscripts, and one piece of furniture. Not from Linway's collection. Those pieces were all at NYU, where they would stay, but a small table I'd bought from an antique shop 20 years earlier, when I'd been browsing for something to put in the entryway. It wasn't valuable. It wasn't historically significant. The dealer had told me it was probably from the 1950s, machine-made, worth maybe $50. But I'd bought it anyway, because something about it reminded me of Linway's work. The proportions were similar to the round table. The wood grain had the same wave-like pattern. And when I looked closely at the joints, I could see hand tool marks, subtle irregularities that suggested human craft rather than machine production. I'd never had it authenticated. Part of me didn't want to know for sure. I preferred the mystery, the possibility. My sister picked up the table, examining it. "What should we do with this?" Michael took it from her gently. "I know what Lynn wanted," he said. "She left instructions." He was right. I'd updated my will the year before, adding a specific clause about the table. Michael brought it to NYU, to the collection room where Linway's furniture still resided. The current curator of the collection, one of my former students, now a professor herself, examined it carefully. "I can't authenticate this without proper testing," she said, "but the construction is consistent with late Qing workshop practices. And these tool marks. She peered closer. These could be from the same hands that made the other pieces? Lynn thought it might be a Lin Wei piece, Michael said, but she was never sure. Should we test it? We have the resources now? Michael shook his head. She didn't want it tested. She wanted it to remain a possibility, a question mark, something for future scholars to discover and puzzle over. The curator smiled. That sounds like Dr. Lin. She placed the table in the collection room next to the round table with mother-of-pearl inlay. They looked good together, like they'd been made to complement each other. A new plaque was added to the door. The Lin Family Furniture Collection. Original collection donated by Dr. Lin Wei, 1965 to 2043. Additional pieces added 2043, in memory of a scholar who taught us to see years past. Students came and went. Scholars studied the furniture, wrote papers, made discoveries. The collection grew as more pieces were identified and donated. Not all of them authenticated. Some of them still questions waiting to be answered. The small table from my entryway was eventually tested 50 years after my death. The results confirmed it was indeed from the Lin family workshop, made around 1915 by one of Lin Wei's apprentices, working in the master's style. By then, it didn't matter if I'd known for certain or just suspected. What mattered was that the piece had been preserved, had been added to the collection, had become part of the ongoing story. The furniture continued. The scholarship continued. The connection between past and future continued. And somewhere in all of it, in the wood grain and tool marks, in the careful joints and elegant proportions, in the hands that touched these pieces across generations, my story continued too. Not because I was remembered personally. Most people forgot my name within a generation. But because I'd chosen to care. I'd chosen to preserve. I'd chosen to pass forward rather than walk away. I'd shaped time, just like Lin Wei had, not with wood, but with choice. And in the end, that was enough.